Breakups happen all the time, both in our personal and professional lives. One breakup that came as a big surprise to most people was the professional split between Alcaraz and Ferrero. In this video, I share my general view on the coach-player relationship and a few thoughts on this surprising news. First, as always, let's take a look at the latest events this week. I returned to our second base in Soma Bay, Egypt. Since the sun has been nowhere to be seen in Vienna in December, I find the change of scenery very positive. The sun is a reliable companion here in Soma Bay, even in December. Here in Soma, I had the opportunity to work with younger players this week. It's certainly not my area of expertise, as I simply lack a lot of experience in this field, but I definitely enjoyed it, and I hope the young players were able to benefit from it a little too. As expected, the week in Vienna was short, as the Christmas holidays fell during this week. At Christmas, even tennis rackets are put aside for a short time, at least in Vienna. But now back to the topic of the coach-player relationship and the difficulties that can arise. In the case of the split between Alcaraz and Ferrero, there are many speculations floating around, and the truth will surely come to light soon. I have no insider knowledge on this and am just as much an outsider as many others. Therefore, my opinions on this are only observations from the outside and include my own experiences, which naturally also play a role. The beginning of the partnership between Alcaraz and Ferrero was certainly marked by Alcaraz's great respect for Ferrero, a young player taken under the wing of a great idol, and that idol believed in the young man's qualities. Therefore, it was certainly very easy for Ferrero to guide and shape this player according to his ideas at the beginning. The successes clearly show that the coach did a very good job in this case. With time, a certain familiarity naturally develops, which is also very important in such a relationship, but one should never forget that it is still a professional relationship. Finding the right balance between familiarity and distance is always a challenge for the coach in a long-term working relationship. The player must of course know that the coach is there for them when they have problems, and that includes personal problems, but how much of their private life the coach is willing to reveal is a balancing act. For my part, I always try to find a line that should not be crossed, and there are a few areas of my private life that should absolutely not be revealed to a player by the coach. Another important factor is the player's environment. In my experience, parents play a decisive role. The more involved a parent is, the more difficult it is for the coach and player to work together. This has nothing to do with parents not knowing anything about the subject or giving bad advice. Their objectivity is simply not the same as that of a good coach, and there are needs to be one person who sets the direction, and that person should be the coach. What else is the coach there for? In Alcaraz's case, his father also seems to have taken on a more active role, but I cannot and will not judge whether this was a decisive factor in the separation. Of course, the financial aspect should not be underestimated either. I don't know how long-term the agreements were in this case. In many cases, the coach receives a percentage of the prize money, which can be up to 10%, sometimes even more. For a young player who is just starting out, this part is just a side effect at the beginning. But in Alcaraz's case, a 10% share of the prize money would of course have grown enormously over the last 2 years. With a net prize money earnings of $50 million, 10% is worth $1.5 million, which is more than $100,000 per month. For a coach like Ferrero, even a monthly salary of probably over $10,000 or a daily rate of $500 and up is just a nice extra income. Whether this was also a topic of discussion during the talks of a contract extension can only be guessed at, but it is conceivable. However, I can hardly imagine that this was a decisive factor for Ferrero. Some reports mention that Ferrero was presented with a contract and had to decide within 48 hours whether he would accept the terms. This would, of course, be a very questionable approach. I think every coach wants to be respected for their work, and I would find this approach very disrespectful and hurtful. If this was really the case, it would give the impression that Alcaraz did not really want to continue the collaboration. An emotional person like Alcaraz, who is now an adult, will no longer be as easy to manage as Ferrero was used to, and it seems that compromises were necessary on his part that he was not comfortable with. On the other hand, Alcaraz no longer wanted to be restricted and wanted to be able to enjoy his life. Both sides have their merits. Once again, balance is crucial. Of course, I cannot judge whether this balance has been disrupted too much, but it was probably increasingly becoming an issue. Maintaining a coach-player relationship over many years is a very difficult undertaking in my opinion. There can be 1,000 reasons to part ways and only one to continue working together, namely that both sides see this as the best option for themselves. Sooner or later, the exact reasons for the separation will become known, but the challenges of working together remain the same everywhere, no matter where you look. Thank you for your interest and see you in the next video.